My fiancée mocked my boring tech job and cheated with her high-powered boss. She didn't know I was the majority shareholder of his firm. I fired him for ethics violations and canceled her luxury car lease the same hour. She begged for mercy. I gave her silence. I never thought I would be the guy posting one of these stories. You scroll through Reddit at 2 in the morning reading about some dude whose wife ran off with the pool guy or whatever, and you think to yourself, man, glad that is not me. Then one Tuesday afternoon, your entire world flips upside down, and suddenly you are the cautionary tale everyone else reads to feel better about their own lives. Buckle up because this one is a ride. Let me give you some background so this whole thing makes sense. My name is Grant, 34 years old, and I live in Phoenix, Arizona. Born and raised in the desert heat, and honestly, I would not have it any other way. People complain about the summers like they just discovered fire is hot, but I figure if you can survive August in the Valley of the Sun, you can survive just about anything life throws at you. That mindset has served me pretty well over the years. I work as a portfolio analyst for a private equity firm called Qley Capital. Basically, I evaluate companies, dig through their financials, assess their growth potential, and help decide where my firm should put its investment dollars. It is not glamorous work. Most of my day involves staring at spreadsheets, drinking way too much coffee, and sitting through conference calls where people use the word synergy like it means something. But here is the thing. I am really good at it. Numbers make sense to me in a way that people sometimes do not. And while the work itself might be about as exciting as watching paint dry, it pays extremely well. Well enough that I bought my own condo at 29 and maxed out my retirement contributions every year since. Here is the part that becomes relevant later. About 6 years ago, my grandfather passed away. His name was Warren, and he was probably the smartest person I ever knew. Street smart, business smart. He started with nothing and made some incredibly savvy investments along the way. One of those investments was in a corporate consulting firm called Whitmore Partners. He got in early, believed in the founders, and put a significant chunk of money into the company. When he died, he left everything to me, his only grandson. At the time I inherited, Whitmore Partners was doing okay, but nothing spectacular. Just another mid-sized consulting firm helping corporations streamline their operations, optimize their workflows, and all that other corporate speak that sounds impressive but basically means helping companies not be stupid about money. The stake my grandfather left me was valuable but not life-changing. A nice cushion, not a golden parachute. Fast forward to today, and the situation looks considerably different. Whitmore Partners landed some major contracts over the past few years. Fortune 500 companies, government agencies, international firms looking to expand into American markets. Their leadership made smart decisions, hired the right people, positioned themselves perfectly for growth. Their valuation shot up like a rocket, and suddenly my inherited stake was worth a whole lot more than I ever expected. 53% to be exact. I am the majority shareholder of Whitmore Partners. Technically, I could walk into their headquarters tomorrow and fire everyone from the CEO down to the janitor if I wanted to. Not that I would ever do that, because I believe in letting professionals do their jobs without interference from some guy who got lucky in the genetic lottery. But the power is there, sitting quietly in my portfolio, waiting. I never talk about it because honestly, it feels strange. I did not earn that money through my own hustle and grind. My grandfather did the work, took the risks, made the smart moves. I just happened to be born to his daughter and be the only grandchild he had. Pure luck of circumstance. So I keep it quiet, live my life like a normal guy making a normal salary, and only think about Whitmore Partners when the quarterly reports come across my desk. Now let me tell you about Nicole, because this is where the story really starts. She was everything I thought I wanted in a partner. Beautiful in that effortless way some women have. Ambitious, always talking about her career goals. Confident in a way that drew people to her. When she walked into a room, people noticed. We met at a charity event 3 years ago. One of those black tie affairs where everyone stands around holding tiny plates of food. I was there representing Qley Capital. Nicole was there as a guest of someone from her company, looking just as bored and uncomfortable as I felt. We ended up at the same hors d'oeuvres table, both reaching for the last crab puff. I let her have it. She smiled, took a bite, and declared it mediocre at best. We got to talking, discovered we both hated these events, and eventually snuck out to grab tacos from a food truck down the street. That was our first date, technically. Street tacos and genuine conversation while sitting on concrete like a couple of teenagers. I was hooked from that moment. Things moved fast after that. Maybe too fast, looking back. But when you are in the middle of it, when everything feels perfect and right and meant to be, you do not stop to question the pace. 6 months in, she moved into my condo. Said her lease was ending anyway, and it just made sense. A year after that, I proposed. Got down on one knee at the same food truck where we had our first unofficial date. She said yes, cried happy tears, posted the whole thing on social media, the fairy tale package, complete with thousands of likes and heart emojis from people we barely knew. Our wedding was scheduled for next spring, April, to be specific. We had the venue booked, the caterer selected, the photographer under contract. Nicole had a Pinterest board with over 300 pins about centerpieces and bridesmaid dresses and cake toppers. Everything was falling into place like puzzle pieces clicking together. Looking back now, I can see the red flags I ignored, the warning signs I explained away because I wanted to believe the best about the woman I loved. Nicole had expensive taste, but not the income to support it. When we met, she was driving a 10-year-old Honda Civic with a dent in the passenger door and living with 2 roommates in a cramped apartment across town. Her job as an executive assistant paid decently, but not extravagantly. Within a year of dating me, everything changed. Suddenly, she needed a nicer car because her old one was not reliable, even though it had never broken down in the time I knew her. Suddenly, she needed designer clothes for work because image was important for advancement, even though her company had no dress code beyond business casual. Suddenly, she needed spa treatments and salon appointments and gym memberships at places that charged more per month than some people pay for rent. I figured she was just trying to level up her professional image. She had gotten promoted to office manager at her company, which came with more responsibility and more visibility. Made sense that she would want to look the part. So I co-signed on a lease for a luxury SUV, a $60,000 vehicle with leather seats, a premium sound system, heated everything, and a price tag that made me wince even though I could afford it. I told myself it was an investment in her career, in our future together. I wanted to support her ambitions. What I did not notice at the time was that her ambitions seemed to expand to fill whatever space I provided. The more I gave, the more she needed. The nicer the things she had, the nicer the things she wanted. It was like trying to fill a bucket with a hole in the bottom. No matter how much you pour in, it is never enough. She also started making comments about my job. At first it was playful teasing, the kind couples do when they are comfortable with each other. Oh, Grant is crunching numbers again. How exciting. Be still, my beating heart. I laughed along because I knew my job was not glamorous. I had no illusions about being some hotshot financier living a Wolf of Wall Street lifestyle. I was a guy who analyzed data and wrote reports. Not exactly the stuff of action movies, but over time, the jokes got sharper, more pointed. She would roll her eyes when I tried to tell her about an interesting project at work. She would change the subject when I mentioned anything related to finance or investing. She started making comments about how I should find something more prestigious, something with a title that would impress people at parties, something that would make her proud to introduce me as her fiancé. One time, at a dinner with her friends, someone asked what I did for a living. Before I could answer, Nicole jumped in with this exaggerated sigh and said he plays with spreadsheets. It was delivered as a joke, got a few laughs from the table, but I could see the embarrassment in her eyes, like my job was something she had to apologize for. I brushed it off because I am not the kind of guy who needs external validation. Never have been. My sense of worth does not come from what other people think of my profession. I know what I bring to the table. My job might sound boring to people who do not understand it, but it allows me to live comfortably, invest for the future, and not stress about money. It provides stability, security, and freedom. That should be enough for anyone with half a brain and reasonable priorities. Then, Nicole got a new job. And this is where things start getting really interesting. About 8 months ago, she came home absolutely glowing with excitement. She had landed a position as operations coordinator at a company called Whitmore Partners. Better title, better salary, better benefits, better everything. She was thrilled about the opportunity to work at such a prestigious firm, with such a strong reputation in the corporate world. I almost choked on my dinner when she told me the name. Whitmore Partners, the company I owned 53% of. The company my grandfather had built into a valuable asset that now sat in my portfolio like a sleeping dragon. But I played it cool, kept my expression neutral, asked the right questions, congratulated her on the new opportunity. Here is the thing. She had no idea about my connection to Whitmore. None at all. She knew I worked in finance, knew I analyzed investments, knew my grandfather had left me some money when he passed. But I had never told her the specifics, never mentioned which companies my inheritance was tied up in, never bragged about my ownership stake, because that is not who I am. She assumed my inheritance was some modest sum that helped with the down payment on the condo. Maybe a few thousand in savings accounts. She had no clue that I could technically walk into her new office and rearrange the entire organizational chart if the mood struck me. She had absolutely no idea that her new employer was, in a very real sense, actually me. I thought about telling her, sat with the decision for a few days, weighing the pros and cons. On one hand, it seemed dishonest to keep such a significant piece of information from my fiancée. On the other hand, something held me back. Call it intuition, call it paranoia, call it a gut feeling I could not quite explain. I wanted to see how she would act when she thought I had no connection to her professional. I wanted to see who she really was when she believed I could not see behind the curtain. That decision, that choice to stay silent and observe, turned out to be one of the smartest moves I ever made. Over the next few months, I watched Nicole's behavior start to shift. The comments about my boring job became more frequent, more cutting. She started comparing me unfavorably to the executives she worked with at Whitmore. These important men with their important jobs making important decisions. She would come home and talk about meetings she sat in on, presentations she helped coordinate, the impressive people she was rubbing elbows with. The subtext was clear. Why could I not be more like them? She also started working late more often. Meetings that ran long, projects with tight deadlines, networking events she absolutely had to attend. I did not think much of it at first. New job, trying to make a good impression, climbing the corporate ladder, all perfectly reasonable explanations. I trusted her because that is what you do when you love someone. You give them the benefit of the doubt. The thing that finally cracked open my suspicions was not anything dramatic. It was small, almost insignificant. One night she came home from one of her late meetings and went straight to the shower. When she came out, I noticed she was wearing different earrings than she had put on that morning. Small diamond studs instead of the gold hoops I remembered seeing at breakfast. When I asked about it, she got flustered, said she must have changed them at the office because the hoops were bothering her ears. Except her gym bag was by the door. And inside that gym bag, when I checked later, were the gold hoops, along with the blouse she had worn to work, and a receipt from a hotel bar downtown, time-stamped 2 hours earlier. I did not confront her then. That is not how I operate. When you work in finance, you learn that information is power. You do not play your hand until you know exactly what cards everyone else is holding. So I filed that receipt away in my memory and started paying closer attention. The answer to all my questions came crashing down on a random Tuesday in October, a day that started completely normal and ended with my entire understanding of my life getting flipped upside down. I had taken a half day from work to handle some personal errands. Dentist appointment in the morning, pick up dry cleaning, drop off a package at the post office. Nothing exciting, just the mundane tasks that pile up when you work 50 hours a week. I finished earlier than expected and found myself with a free afternoon and nothing pressing to do. On impulse, I decided to swing by Nicole's office to surprise her for lunch. We had not done that in a while, not since she started the new job. I thought it would be a nice gesture. Maybe reconnect a little since things had felt distant between us lately. The distance I had attributed to her adjustment to the new position, but now suspected had other explanations. Whitmore Partners has their headquarters in a sleek glass office building in Scottsdale, the kind of building that looks like it was designed to intimidate visitors with its corporate grandeur. I parked in the underground garage and took the elevator up to the 6th floor where Nicole's department was located. I knew the layout from the occasional company reports I reviewed as majority shareholder, though I had never actually visited in person, part of my hands-off approach to ownership. The reception area was empty when I stepped off the elevator, probably because it was around noon and most people were at lunch or in the break room. The receptionist desk sat unoccupied, computer screen showing a screensaver of the company logo bouncing around. I figured I would just walk back to Nicole's desk and surprise her there. Her workstation was empty too, cleared off actually, like she had stepped away for more than just a quick break. Her computer was locked, her purse was gone, but her jacket was still draped over the back of her chair. So she was somewhere in the building. Then I heard voices, coming from a conference room down the hall, through a door that was slightly open, and I recognized Nicole's laugh immediately. That distinctive giggle she does when she thinks something is really funny, the one that made me fall in love with her 3 years ago over street tacos. I walked closer, not thinking anything suspicious, assuming she was just chatting with coworkers about weekend plans or office gossip. The conference room had glass walls, but the blinds were partially drawn, blocking most of the view inside. I could see shadows moving, but not details. Then I heard a male voice, low, confident, with that smooth tone some men use when they think they are charming. He was saying something about how she deserved better than some boring number cruncher who could not appreciate what he had. How a woman like her needed a real man with ambition and power. How he could give her the life she actually wanted, the life she deserved. I stopped walking, stood completely still in that corporate hallway with its industrial carpet and fluorescent lighting, feeling my world tilt on its axis. Nicole's response made my blood run cold. She agreed with him, said I was sweet but dull, that I had no drive, no passion, no vision for the future, That being with me was like settling for a participation trophy when she deserved first place. Said I was adequate, but that adequate was not enough for someone like her. Then, she said something that hit me like a sledgehammer to the chest. She called me her placeholder boyfriend. Said she had just been waiting for something better to come along. Someone who matched her potential. Someone worthy of the life she was building. Said that someone was him. The male voice laughed, pleased with himself. Said he knew from the moment he saw her that she was meant for more than some boring finance drone. Said she was a diamond that had been wasted on a cubic zirconia setting. I heard movement, shuffling, then sounds I really did not need to hear through a conference room door. Sounds that made it very clear exactly what kind of meeting was happening in there. I did not barge in, did not kick down the door and make a scene, did not confront them in their moment of betrayal. I just stood there in that hallway, completely still, processing what I had just learned about the woman I was supposed to marry in 5 months. The woman who wore my ring, slept in my bed, spent my money, and apparently viewed me as nothing more than a placeholder until someone better came along. After about 30 seconds, I turned around and walked out the way I came. The receptionist was back at her desk by then, young woman with a friendly smile. No idea she was watching a man whose life had just imploded walk calmly past her like nothing was wrong. I smiled back, wished her a nice day, took the elevator down to the parking garage, got in my truck, drove home. The whole ride, I did not feel angry. Not yet. Anger would come later, in waves, at 3 in the morning when I could not sleep. In that moment, I just felt empty, hollow, like someone had scooped out everything inside me and left nothing but a shell going through the motions. That night, Nicole came home acting completely normal, kissed me on the cheek, asked about my day, complained about traffic on the freeway coming home, chatted about some drama with a coworker, what she wanted for dinner, whether we should try that new restaurant downtown this weekend. I watched her performance and marveled at how convincing she was. Every smile, every touch, every casual comment delivered with perfect authenticity. If I had not heard it with my own ears just hours earlier, I would have believed she was a loving, faithful partner who could not wait to marry me. The acting skills were genuinely impressive. Made me wonder how long she had been rehearsing this role, how many nights she had come home from being with him and pretended everything was fine. I did not confront her. Not yet. Confrontation requires leverage, and leverage requires information. I needed to know exactly what I was dealing with before I made my move. Over the next few days, I did my homework, quietly, methodically, the same way I would research a potential investment. The man Nicole was cheating with was named Bradley Harmon, 41 years old, Chief Operations Officer at Whitmore Partners, which made him one of the top executives at the company. My company, technically, though he had no idea I existed as anything more than a name on some shareholder document he probably never bothered to read. Bradley had been with Whitmore for 7 years, working his way up from a mid-level consultant to his current position through a combination of competence and, apparently, strategic relationship building. He was divorced twice, no kids, drove a Tesla that cost more than some people's houses, and had a reputation around the office for being a smooth talker with a wandering eye. The kind of guy who viewed workplace relationships as a perk of his position rather than a liability. I also discovered, through some discreet investigation of internal records I had access to as majority shareholder, that Bradley had been involved with at least 2 other female employees over the past 3 years. Both had eventually left the company under circumstances that HR documented as voluntary resignations, but which looked suspiciously like women getting squeezed out after things went sour. Nothing concrete enough for anyone to act on at the time, but definitely a pattern. The guy was a serial workplace predator hiding behind his executive title and corporate power. Meanwhile, Nicole got bolder, more confident in her deception. She would come home late claiming meetings ran long, networking events went overtime, traffic was terrible. She would be glued to her phone, giggling at texts she made sure to angle away from my view. Started criticizing me more openly, comparing me unfavorably to successful men she admired. Men who took charge, made things happen, commanded respect. She even mentioned Bradley by name, multiple times, talked about what an impressive leader he was, how everyone at the company looked up to him, how he was the kind of man who got things done. The admiration in her voice was barely disguised. She was basically describing her affair partner to my face while I nodded along and pretended not to notice. I just listened, observed, let her dig her own grave one shovelful at a time. The final straw came at a dinner party hosted by one of Nicole's friends. Couples thing, 8 people total, gathered around a fancy dining table eating food that looked better than it tasted and making small talk about nothing important. The kind of evening I would normally just endure until I could go home and decompress. Someone asked me what I did for a living. Standard dinner party conversation, nothing unusual. Before I could open my mouth to answer, Nicole jumped in with that performative sigh she had perfected. "Oh, Grant pushes papers at some boring finance company," she said. "His idea of excitement is when the quarterly reports come in ahead of schedule. I am basically engaged to the human equivalent of a screensaver. Always there, never doing anything interesting." Everyone laughed politely because what else are you supposed to do when someone humiliates their partner in public? A few people looked uncomfortable. One guy caught my eye with the expression that clearly said, "Yikes, sorry, dude." I just smiled, took a sip of my water, stayed calm on the outside while cataloging another piece of evidence for the case I was building. Another exhibit in the Museum of Nicole's Contempt. She had no idea who she was dealing with, and Bradley Harmon had no idea what was coming. The following Monday, I made some phone calls. As majority shareholder of Whitmore Partners, I had significant influence over the board of directors. I rarely exercised that power because I genuinely believed in letting competent people run the business without interference from someone whose main qualification was lucky inheritance. But special circumstances call for special measures. I requested an emergency meeting with the board for that Thursday afternoon, framed it as concerns about potential liability issues within the executive team. The board members, all experienced business people who understood that liability issues could destroy companies, immediately cleared their calendars. When Thursday came, I presented my findings. The documented pattern of Bradley Harmon's inappropriate relationships with subordinate employees. The suspicious circumstances around 2 female employees leaving the company after involvement with him. The potential for sexual harassment lawsuits, hostile work environment claims, reputational damage to the firm. I did not mention Nicole. Did not need to. The pattern was clear without her name in the mix. The board members were horrified, not because they were naive about workplace misconduct, but because they had no idea it was happening under their noses. Bradley had been careful, discreet, choosing women who would not cause trouble, until now. The vote was unanimous. Bradley Harmon would be terminated for cause: ethics violations, failure to maintain appropriate professional boundaries, repeated violations of company policy regarding workplace relationships. By Friday afternoon, it was done. Bradley was called into HR, presented with the evidence and the decision, and given 1 hour to collect his personal belongings before security escorted him to the parking garage. No severance package, no positive reference, no golden parachute to soften his landing. Just a termination letter that would follow him to every future job application. I was not there to witness it personally, did not need to be. But I heard the details through multiple sources over the following days. Apparently, Bradley was in complete shock, kept insisting there must be some mistake, that he had done nothing wrong, that someone was setting him up. He demanded to know who was behind this, who had compiled the evidence, who had authorized his termination. Nobody told him the truth. That information was above his pay grade. Nicole called me that afternoon, voice high with panic. "Something crazy happened at work," she said. "Bradley got fired. Just like that, out of nowhere. Everyone is freaking out. Nobody knows what happened or why. The whole office is in chaos." I acted surprised, asked sympathetic questions, offered to make her favorite dinner to help her feel better after such a stressful day. She barely paid attention to my words, too busy staring at her phone, texting furiously, probably trying to reach Bradley, probably learning that his number was already disconnected, his email bouncing back, his professional existence erased in a matter of hours. That same day, while Nicole was distracted by her crumbling affair, I made another phone call. The luxury SUV I had co-signed for her, I was the primary account holder since her credit score had not been good enough to qualify on her own. I contacted the leasing company and exercised my contractual right to terminate the lease early, paid the penalty fee without hesitation, arranged for a flatbed truck to pick up the vehicle from our parking garage the following morning. When Nicole woke up on Saturday and looked out the window to see her beloved $60,000 SUV being loaded onto a truck by 2 guys in coveralls, she completely lost her composure, came storming into the kitchen, where I was calmly eating cereal, demanding to know what was happening, why they were taking her car, who she needed to call to fix this. I told her, voice calm and even, that I had terminated the lease. She stared at me like I had started speaking in tongues, asked why I would do that, what was wrong with me, had I lost my mind. I said I no longer felt comfortable subsidizing her lifestyle. Simple as that. Before she could respond, before she could formulate her next argument or manipulation, I handed her a folder. Manila. Nothing special, the kind you can buy anywhere. But what was inside was definitely not ordinary. Printouts. Screenshots of text messages between her and Bradley that I had obtained through my access to company communication systems. Nothing explicitly incriminating on its own, but when combined with everything else, painted a very clear picture. A timeline showing when her late nights at work coincided with Bradley's calendar being blocked for private meetings. A copy of the receipt I had found in her gym bag from the hotel bar downtown. A transcript of what I had heard through that conference room door, as accurate as I could remember it. Everything she needed to understand that I knew, that I had known for weeks, that every smile and kiss and casual conversation since that Tuesday had been me watching her perform while knowing exactly who she really was. Nicole's face went the color of old paper. She started stammering, her carefully constructed composure cracking apart like ice in spring. Started trying to explain, to justify, to spin some story that would make this all okay. She said it was not what it looked like. She said Bradley had pursued her, that she was just a victim of his manipulation. She said she was confused about her feelings, stressed from the new job, not thinking clearly. She said she still loved me, that what we had was real, that we could work through this if I would just listen to her side of the story. I let her talk, sat there eating my cereal while she exhausted every excuse in her arsenal, cycled through every manipulation tactic she knew, tried tears and anger and desperate bargaining. When she finally ran out of words and stood there panting like she had just run a marathon, I set down my spoon and spoke for the first time. I told her I was the majority shareholder of Whitmore Partners. The confusion on her face was almost comical. What? What does that have to do with anything? I told her Bradley worked for me. Technically, that I owned 53% of the company she joined 8 months ago. That I was the one who had brought the evidence of his misconduct to the board. That I was the reason her powerful executive boyfriend was now unemployed and unhireable. I told her the car was gone because I refused to finance her affair. And I told her she had until the end of the week to move out of my condo. The look that crossed her face in that moment was something I will remember for the rest of my life. Not just shock, not just fear. The sudden, crystallizing realization that she had massively, catastrophically miscalculated. She thought she was trading up from a boring placeholder to a powerful executive. Instead, she had cheated on the guy who quietly owned the company, gotten her side piece fired and blacklisted, and was now facing the loss of her home, her car, and her entire constructed lifestyle in one devastating blow. She tried begging. She actually got down on her knees right there in the kitchen, tears streaming down her face, voice cracking with desperation. She said she had made a terrible mistake, said she would do anything to fix this. Anything at all. Just name it. Said she loved me, and that Bradley meant nothing, was just a momentary lapse in judgment, a stupid mistake she would regret forever. She promised she would change, be better, appreciate me the way I deserved to be appreciated. I said nothing, just looked at her, kept my expression completely neutral while she bargained for mercy. After about 5 minutes of her cycling through variations of the same desperate pleas, she switched tactics, got angry, pushed herself off the floor and started pacing, voice rising as she found her second wind. She accused me of tricking her, of deliberately hiding my wealth to test her loyalty, to entrap her into some elaborate scheme. She said this whole situation was my fault for not being honest about who I really was. Called me manipulative, controlling, vindictive. Said I had set her up to fail from the very beginning. She said I would regret this, that she would tell everyone what I did, expose me as the monster I really was. She would go to social media, to the press, to anyone who would listen. She would destroy my reputation the same way I had destroyed hers. I still said nothing, just waited for her to run out of steam again. When neither begging nor threats produced any response from me, she finally deflated. The anger drained out of her like water from a cracked vessel. She stood there in my kitchen, arms hanging at her sides, looking smaller than I had ever seen her. She asked quietly, voice barely above a whisper, if there was any chance at all that we could talk about this, any possibility of working something out. I gave her silence, just shook my head once, slowly, and walked out of the room. She was gone by Wednesday, moved in with her sister across town. I had the locks changed that same day, not because I genuinely believed she would try to come back, but because I wanted a clean break, fresh locks for a fresh start. Symbolism matters. The aftermath played out over the following weeks and months, like a slow-motion demolition of everything Nicole had tried to build. Bradley Harmon, now unemployed and increasingly desperate, apparently tried to contact her multiple times, but Nicole wanted nothing to do with him. In her mind, he was radioactive, the reason her comfortable life had imploded, the powerful man who turned out to be powerless when it actually mattered. She blocked his number and pretended he did not exist. Bradley also tried to sue Whitmore Partners for wrongful termination. The case lasted about 3 weeks before his own attorney advised him to drop it. The evidence of his inappropriate behavior was overwhelming. He burned through most of his savings on legal fees before accepting reality. Nicole made several attempts to reach me over the following weeks. Text messages at first, long rambling paragraphs that alternated between apology and justification. She was sorry for what she did, but I needed to understand the pressure she was under. She made mistakes, but I had not been blameless either. She missed what we had, and maybe if we both worked on ourselves, we could try again someday. I never responded, not once. When texts got no reaction, she escalated to phone calls, left increasingly desperate voicemails about needing closure, needing to understand, needing one conversation so she could move on. She cried in some of them, got angry in others, begged, threatened, bargained through my voicemail inbox like she was working through the stages of grief. I let every single call go unanswered. Silence can be louder than any words. About 3 months after everything went down, I heard through mutual friends that Nicole was not doing great. She was back to driving her old Honda Civic. She had gotten a job at a retail store because her reputation at Whitmore was destroyed. She had moved into a small apartment with 2 roommates. Full circle. Back to the beginning. Like the last 3 years had been erased from her life. But the real entertainment came about 4 months after the split. I was at a coffee shop near my office when my phone buzzed with a text from a former coworker at Whitmore. Apparently, Nicole had tried to get her old job back. Just walked into the building, asked to speak with HR, and requested to be considered for any open positions. She had no idea that everyone in that building knew exactly who I was by then. The HR director politely informed her that there were no suitable positions available and escorted her out. She tried to argue, made a scene in the lobby, and security had to be called. Bradley's trajectory was even more entertaining to watch from a distance. Without his executive title and salary, his lifestyle collapsed fast. The Tesla got repossessed within 2 months. His condo went into foreclosure by month 4. Last I heard, he was doing consulting work as an independent contractor, which is corporate speak for unemployed and desperate. His LinkedIn profile went from chief operations officer to open to opportunities, which might be the saddest 2 words in the professional world. The best part came about 6 months after everything went down. Nicole finally figured out the full picture. Someone at Whitmore had mentioned my name in connection with the shareholder meeting where Bradley's termination was decided. She did some digging, put the pieces together, and completely lost it. She showed up at my condo unannounced on a Saturday morning, pounding on the door, screaming in the hallway about how I had ruined her life, how I had set her up from the beginning, how I was a monster who played sick games with. My neighbors came out to see what the commotion was about. I called the building security and had her removed. She was still screaming accusations as they walked her to the elevator. The next week, I got a cease and desist letter from an attorney she had somehow scraped together enough money to hire. The letter accused me of emotional manipulation, financial abuse, and about a dozen other things that made no legal sense. My attorney sent back a response that basically said, "Try it and see what happens." We never heard from them again. She made one last attempt to contact me about 8 months after the breakup. A handwritten letter, 3 pages long, delivered to my office. I recognized her handwriting on the envelope. I did not open it, just dropped it in the shredder and went back to work. Around the same time, I got an interesting piece of news from the Whitmore board. They wanted to formally thank me for bringing the Bradley situation to their attention. Apparently, after his termination, 2 former employees had come forward with their own stories about his behavior. One was considering legal action before he was fired, but decided not to pursue it once he was gone. The company had dodged a massive lawsuit because I had acted when I did. The board voted to increase my quarterly dividend as a gesture of appreciation. So let me do the math on how this whole thing played out. Nicole lost her car, her condo, her job, her reputation, and her fiancé. Bradley lost his career, his income, his Tesla, his condo, and any chance of working in corporate consulting again. I lost a cheating fiancé I was better off without. And I gained a larger dividend check from the company they both thought was above my pay grade. I would say the numbers worked out in my favor. 1 year later, things are good. I sold the condo and bought a house with a pool and a view of Camelback Mountain. Got a promotion at Keller Capital that came with a corner office Nicole would have loved to brag about. Started dating someone new, a pediatric nurse named Rachel, who drives a 10-year-old Jeep and could not care less about what I do for a living. She thinks my job is boring and tells me so regularly, but she says it with a smile while making me dinner in my new kitchen. Last month, I ran into one of Nicole's friends at a grocery store. She looked uncomfortable when she saw me, probably expecting me to be bitter or angry. I just smiled and asked how she was doing. She mentioned that Nicole had moved to another state, trying to start over somewhere nobody knew her history. I wished her well, paid for my groceries, and went home. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that subscribe button. It really helps the channel and help us bring you more and better stories. Thanks. Stories. Thanks. Stories. Thanks. Stories. Thanks. Stories.